4:48, and I believe our technology problems are under control now. We'll go ahead with the video.
Okay. We're going to try this. Here we go.
Wisconsin's abundant natural resources and iconic North Woods are treasured by residents and visitors alike. Forests make up 47% of the Badger State, equaling 17 million acres, with 5.5 million of those being publicly owned and open for exploration. These millions of acres provide numerous benefits, from healthy forests, robust wildlife habitat, abundant clean air and water, to plentiful raw materials for Wisconsin's $24 billion forest products industry. These valuable resources are not achieved by luck or happy accident. Wisconsin has a long, rich history of sound forest management, provided by multiple public and private partners, which makes these benefits possible. And the county forest system is essential in this effort. It encompasses 30 counties with over 2.4 million acres of forest, making it the largest public land base in the state. And it's their hard work and dedicated stewardship of their great forests that maintains the forest and recreation benefits enjoyed by all Wisconsinites and visitors. You might be surprised to learn how interwoven Wisconsin's forestry industry is and how important it is to our daily lives. For example, when building a deck, it might seem like the process begins with simply buying the 2x4s you'll need and ends with their assembly. The real story is much bigger. From a tiny sapling that grows into a tree in a county forest, to the forester who cares for it and helps it thrive, to the logger who sustainably harvests the tree, to the truckers who transport the logs to a mill for cutting, and finally to the retailer for your purchase. The forest products you rely on flow through a long line of dedicated forestry professionals. The vast majority of county forests are also third-party certified, meaning you can rest assured the 2x4 you bought or the paper you use was produced from trees harvested through best management practices. And the story continues. Revenue from harvested trees goes back to the county to start the cycle over. Revenue also helps pay for many outdoor recreation amenities, county staff, highway department projects, and helps offset property taxes. That's right, you can thank county forest management not only for the wood you buy, but for lower taxes, the trails you enjoy, and the roads you travel. County forests are also fundamental to Wisconsin's outdoor tourism industry, the #1 industry in 8 of 30 member counties, and in the top 5 of 27. Benefits include nearly 1,800 miles of ATV trails, over 9,000 miles of snowmobile trails, and nearly 300 boat landings. That's in addition to over 1,800 miles of hiking, snowshoe, horse, and bike trails, over 3,300 campsites, and many other outdoor recreation opportunities that are made possible by the exceptional work done by county forests. Want to learn more about the management of Wisconsin's forests? The Wisconsin County Forest Association is a great place to start. Visit wisconsincountyforest.com for more details.
Should this Genius Pocket change?
Okay, so Jacob, per your guidance, we're going to move on to 6.3 and then come back and discuss 5.2 and 6.3 all at once. So for 6.3, the objective is protect and enhance the quantity and quality of potable groundwater and potable surface water supplies. So generally, we have a different suggested revision for each one. With the first one, we'll be recommending just to revise the end date to 2024. With Measure 2, we'll be talking about revising it also to 2024 and just changing the language in the outcome measure a little bit to be more accurate, but I'll have Shad explain that in a minute. And then we also want to discuss some ideas as it relates to outcome measure 3 with the animal waste facility. So I will turn it over to Kirsty to discuss outcome measure 1 and 3, and then Shad will take outcome measure 2.
Okay. So outcome measure 1. Okay. So with our groundwater protection plan, CPZ did put in a SIP request for the 2023 budget to begin the planning effort. And we've kind of tried to keep you on the loop going forward that it is our end goal in updating the Marathon County groundwater plan to go into the update of that plan with a solid set of data. That is the biggest thing that we're lacking in order to accurately update the plan is any type of well testing data. And so we have connected with UW Stevens Point Groundwater Lab, and they do have the capacity to help us launch a necessary effort in Marathon County of testing about 1,000 wells. That is what they think is what could give us some good baseline data given the size of our county. So we would like to begin that testing in 2023. And so we would like to revise the overall date of having this goal accomplished by December of 2024. And so, we've had a lot of good discussions recently about how getting this plan updated along with a fresh set of data will really help us know where we're at and then how we want to go forward as well. Do you want to talk about focus?
Sure. So just kind of discussing the outcome measure 2. Currently, our goal is by September 31st, 2022, the number of pouts discharging sewage to ground surface will be reduced by 750 systems or more. Currently, we're right around the 350 systems mark that have been replaced since 2018. Moving forward, we just wanted to make sure that we addressed all failing pouts. We wanted the outcome measure to reflect that, so not just discharging to surface waters, but all failing pouts. If a pouts is failing, it's not working correctly, and it has the potential to impact or threaten our surface and groundwaters. And also, if it is failing, it is required to be replaced by law. We are making progress towards this. More time. We do need more time to get to that 750 mark, but we feel that this goal should remain the same, just a little bit of a wording change to include all of the failing pouts versus just surface discharge.
Okay, thanks. And then the final outcome that was previously listed had that by December of 2022 that discharges to surface and groundwater will be reduced by ensuring that all idle animal waste facilities are closed in compliance with our ordinance requirements. We have on here that the status and moving forward we would like to discuss with you all today because the concept of having this as an outcome, we view it really as a moving target in our department. The reason for that is that we have hundreds of animal waste storage facilities in Marathon County, and what is happening is that as we work to close, half a dozen idle manure storage facilities a year. It's about the same amount of facilities that continue to go idle as well, with farms that stop using them and whatnot. And so to just say that, we will say all idle animal waste facilities will be closed. That's not necessarily a goal that's like measurable or attainable or anything like that, since that number is constantly changing. You're shooting at a moving target the entire time. And so while we can agree that most of the time it is a good idea to close those idle facilities, we have found that it is also of benefit to sometimes have those storage facilities that are not being used. So sometimes there are emergency situations where someone does need that storage, and we can contact a farmer and say, we know that you do have a safe and empty waste storage facility, and we do need to use that for emergency measures just as something temporary because we do have a farmer that has an emergency storage situation. So what we wanted to discuss today is perhaps changing that outcome to something that we are also going to be focusing on in our work to protect both ground and surface water. So one thing that I would like to propose is perhaps changing the outcome to focus on wellhead protection areas within Marathon County. I have polled a few different people involved in county work, and what I have found is that the DNR maps these wellhead protection areas around the county. I could turn on a website right now and show you the circle around these fields in the county that are protecting these large community wells. And a lot of the land use that's occurring in those wellhead protection areas, it is land use that would be concerning in terms of thinking of, okay, is this something that's going to be protecting or potentially harming groundwater supplies? And so it seems like there is no person or party that is interested in taking a look at those protection areas and working with municipalities or landowners to see that there's something that would make sense. Another thing that we're really going to be focusing on are buffers and wetland restoration. And so we can also all agree that there is science behind the fact that those two key land use practices are something that help protect both groundwater and surface water. So we can dig more into this in some discussion if you would like. If you do like how this outcome measure 3 is currently listed, I don't think we would put up, a huge fight saying this is not the direction we want to go. It's maybe a good end goal. It's just not very specific and measurable and attainable. And so we'd like to maybe change that outcome to be something a little bit more towards what we actually are hoping to spend a lot of our time and energy and resources focusing on over the next 2 years.
I'll just put it up to the summary slide for 5.2, and then we'll take discussions and questions.
Can we eliminate the, I don't know what you call it, but the sidebar so we have a little larger? Beautiful, thank you.
Do we have any questions on anything we presented thus far?
Supervisor Overbeck.
Thank you. Just have a question. On objective 6.3, how does metallic mining fit into this objective? It seems that it's not mentioned, but it affects, we're talking about drilling wells or wells compared to drilling and things like that. But I would think that would be some type of outcome measure as far as protecting the groundwater.
I think, as it relates to the groundwater plan, one of our goals would be to put together a work group that would sort of drive that direction and work that goes into the groundwater plan. And if that was something I think that work group thought was important, it would be incorporated into that planning effort. Do you want to add anything to that? Yeah. Yeah.
I would just add that in regards to the overall objective with water quality, that's obviously, one of the main missions of our staff in the department. Those specific outcome measures, derive mainly from the comp plan. Those are the specific objectives that I think the county has some sphere of influence over in regards to accomplishing these overall objectives. So to the staff's credit, I think that's a good explanation that it's in there. It's just fit in under another piece, essentially. But I'm sure there's plenty of programs within the staff, or within the department, I should say, that aren't specifically listed underneath either of these objectives, but they fit in even though they're not explicitly stated. So, other questions for staff? Supervisor Seefeld and Supervisor Drabeck and then Supervisor Seefeld.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, are we on 5.2 or 6.3 I think we should be specific on that and just go to one and then the other.
I'll defer to the committee how they want to discuss that. I was considering taking both of these together and having a discussion that way. But if the committee wants to start with 5.2 and move on to 6.3, I have no objection to that either. So if you'd all like to start with 5.2 and move on to 6.3, that's perfectly fine. Okay. Now, did you have something for 5.2, Supervisor Draybeck?
I did, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, in 5.2, they were talking about the number of towns and county zoning, and to be going for education, doing more with education with the towns. How is this going to be done? Are you going to have an individual educational with each town? Are you going to call up a meeting and have so many towns there? What's your plan that way?
Yeah.
And, and just curious on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've had a couple different ideas for how to do this. One is that we would try and hold an annual event, kind of similar to what we do in our POUTS program when we're working with our plumbers. So do some outreach to try and get all the towns to attend that, understanding that we might have to offer a couple different times or something to accommodate different schedules. We've also been, in the last year, we've been focusing on the towns with county zoning, trying to get out to more of their meetings. We'd also like to increase our outreach with all towns with newsletters and using social media or newsletters where possible. So I think those are a couple different ways we might look at doing that. So.
Oh, thank you. My other question on that would be as you're teaching them, can you also get the information back from them, such as, what their specific rules are? Maybe the county could get those rules and, so we could, avoid some zoning issues that way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, honestly, getting the town's feedback is one of the big things with this as well. It's something that we can take into consideration what their zoning ordinances are, as well as with this training. One of the ideas that's been passed around is also getting a survey out there that identifies what the towns feel they need to know, and vice versa. Once the training event is done, how they felt the training went or what could be improved on as well.
I want to follow up to highlight part of Supervisor Draybeck's point, though, which is that I think that it goes beyond just getting the feedback from the towns. It also has to do with their specific, their comprehensive plan, any other plans that they might have in place as far as the county being able to access that information beyond just what's provided in that application. We've had some issues with that in the past. To Supervisor Draybeck's point, though, I do want to just say that this can serve two functions and sort of kill two birds with one stone, which is you get to talk about the idea of the product, you get to market the system, which is being under county zoning as opposed to having your own town zoning or no zoning for that matter. And on top of that, you do get to do some education and help those local government officials understand how the process works. So I, of course, would be very supportive of this. I will just add, though, historically, I've had some difficulty with this objective, primarily being, the outcome measure, primarily because in my county board district, I have one town under county zoning and I have two towns under town zoning. And what I've discovered over time, and this goes beyond those communities and other communities, is that there is a historical approach to problem solving that has to do with, it's a town issue, therefore it's a town plan, therefore it's the town's responsibility for having their own zoning ordinance. So I think that that's something that, given the outcome measure, the new one that's provided here in regards to providing education as opposing to having these 4 additional ones or what have you, I think that's important. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the local government's decision, but that shouldn't prevent our staff from being able to talk about the process itself and help the process improve over time. Now, did you have a follow-up after that, Supervisor Draybeck, or? No, Supervisor Seefeld, and then Marilyn.
One thing is that.
Marilyn, Supervisor Seefeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at all three of the outcome measures, the word will is in there. Do we, I mean, you got to determine what the word will means. Do we change this as a goal, or is the word will, satisfies our outcome measure?
Mr. Chair, I could probably respond to that.
Sure, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. There are, if you look at the definitions of what a goal is, an objective and a strategic action is, that's identified in the plan, and that will help clarify that. When it comes to a measurable outcome, you have to have typically a time, an action, and a time frame in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. That's your measurable element over X period of time. So, example, when we go back to the original question in terms of bringing 4 towns on, that's really a difficult moving target. It's easier than the one that we had, which was 100% of the towns. But I think what's being suggested by SHAD and CPZ at this point in terms of informing and having educational components to all towns, whether they're even non-town, town zone town, and county zone town, is important. And the reason that's important is because we have significant turnover typically every 2 years, and we lose this institutional knowledge. So the will, I wouldn't get too hung up on. It's not like a shall, if you will. It's a specific goal that we're trying to accomplish over time. We may not meet, as indicated and demonstrated, that we're not meeting 320 acres in terms of additional forest and parklands, right? But it's a measure by which we can try to achieve. And when we do these update processes, where and what are we actually accomplishing, and did we overshoot the bar, and did we have to make an adjustment? I hope that helped.
Thank you, Jeff. Marilyn.
As much as I like for towns to be in charge of everything, we have to realize that, sometimes the town boards change every 2 years. And to know that, let's face it, most town boards do not have the knowledge that a county people would have in order for enforcement and everything like that. Plus, that you're paying taxes towards conservation, zoning, and planning, and you get part of their advice, and that if you follow it, you stay out of trouble. And if you're on your own, you hire your own attorney, and you do your own meetings. So it all depends on how strong of a town board you have and how well they keep up on all the changes of the laws and everything. And to know, even if you have town zoning, it still goes to the county board for approval, which most cases it always does. The only thing is, if there's a lot of major changes, it's nice to be able to depend upon somebody that has a training and background, and that's what they do most of the time. But if you have a good town board and a good planning and zoning group in your town, you can do it on your own. But most towns don't have that capability, so you have your choice to make of how you want to proceed with zoning and planning in your town.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I think that speaks to the point of education, and that being, even if a town still has town zoning, we don't have to feel this pressure that we have to have 4 to get that done. And we also can continue to expand county zoning while also providing education to help, like I said, the process go smoother. So I don't think that based on the discussion I'm getting from the committee, I don't think that we have any issue with the outcome measure for the zoning piece changing. And depending on feedback, maybe we have to think about doing more training sessions like that. But I do support this change. Now, Supervisor Shafinsky, I think you had something to add, correct?
I do, but not on that particular point.
Not on 5.2?
5.2, but outcome measure 3.
Okay, well, is there anything else why don't we do, is there anything else to add with the zoning piece? No? Okay, Supervisor Shafinsky, which outcome measure do you want to take up?
I would like to address outcome measure 3.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I look at that, and the way I read that is a kind of an institutional or bureaucratic push to consistently add acreage to the Parks and Parks Department, regardless of the good intentions that we might have there. I look at that and I have grave concerns about a policy by which we say we are going to consistently increase the amount of land that the county owns. I mean, it's well-intentioned, but I think that we need to scale that back and actually focus a targeted need to add land to the Parks Department, not necessarily a blind, let's just constantly increase the amount of land that the county owns.
Okay, yeah, Tom, go ahead.
No, thank you. So I just want to address this in relation to our county outdoor recreation plan and our county forest comprehensive plan. So those two plans identify and had support from user groups and those that submitted comments that we should be increasing our land. So I just wanted to make that clear to the committee. It's not something that we are as staff saying that this should happen. I think personally, I think there's good reasons for increasing the amount of lands. There's a lot of reasons to do that, but it has come from the public through our public participation process. So I want to make sure that the committee knows that it's not coming directly from staff.
In the sense that, Tom, that you're not producing an arbitrary number, you're taking the feedback from the public in regards to where this is coming from.
That's correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify, under outcome measure 3, the goal is 320 acres, but we haven't even been close to getting that over the last 5 years. And outcome measure 3, we're recommending that it be extended to December 31st of 2024.
Okay. So we had a comment from Lance, and then I saw you reaching for the mic. Then okay, you'll have a follow-up then. No? You will. I'm going to do Lance, and then we'll go to you, Tony. Okay?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Lance. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps based on just dovetailing with what Tom just offered, and I think to Supervisor Shafinsky's point, understanding kind of the impetus to that outcome measure in those other plans that Tom referenced, the outdoor recreation plan and the comprehensive forestry plan we have, as well as perhaps providing the committee a little bit of an update on some of the work that staff have been doing relative to the carbon, investigating the carbon programs that are becoming more available and a number of other counties are entering into. Perhaps that would be helpful to aid in this conversation. I know it's perhaps not going to be timely if you want to take action today to move this forward. But I will tell you, you have the opportunity at any time. The county board can amend the strategic plan. It's a living, breathing document, and if you want to modify it in, what month is it? It's August. Modify it in September or October, and then modify it again in January. You are entirely able to do that. But I get the sense from the discussion that there may be value for staff to bring those plans to you and do a relatively short presentation on the genesis of those plans, but also that carbon program, which the forestry committee did get a brief presentation earlier today on, as I understand it. And I will just tell you as your administrator, That is a pretty significant recent development that a number of counties are taking a look at that has the potential for very significant revenue opportunities that have been that haven't been historically available to counties for all the reasons and all the purposes that are set forth in that video that you watched earlier. So perhaps that would be a good use of the committee's time at a future meeting, Mr. Chair, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Lance. Supervisor Finsky.
Thanks, Chairman. I think the way I would look at this and be more favorable about it is if we were looking at targeted specific responses to public input. And to use an example, because it's sometimes a little bit easier to think in terms of concrete examples, if we had specific public input from the snowmobile groups or the cross-country ski groups to expand a county trail or parking for a particular area because it's highly used and we need more parking area or whatever it might be, but something that's targeted rather than the just kind of a blind number, I think might be more accountable.
Okay, Supervisor Ritter, and then Tom, did you have another comment? No? Not this
I just
time?
wanted to add, if you will, in our specific plans, we have a blocking boundary, so we have identified those lands within our county forest comprehensive plan and within our court plan of where those parks should be out there that aren't within 20 minutes of driving. So we have, maybe not completely, as Supervisor Shafinsky said, targeted specific areas, but we've targeted blocking areas, so it would block in our specific areas, or we could, for administration and potential forest lands and park lands that would be valuable for the county to acquire. So I just add that.
Sure. All right, Supervisor Ritter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the problem with say targeting land for a parking lot, for instance, that's going to look bad because it's going to look like we are aggressively trying to take land over. Where the way it is now, if they're just going after land that's already for sale or land that's offered to the county that provides a great source of revenue and a great source of recreation, I really don't see the problem with it the way it is.
Other questions, comments? So, Tom, why don't you give an overview then of what that process looks like when you acquire the land? Because maybe that'll illustrate the process a little bit more, right? So if a property comes up and let's say it's right next to a county park, right? Probably a pretty good area to think about adding onto the park, right? Tell us about something like that.
So, yeah, so the last two purchases that we had up there were additions to county parks, existing county parks. It was just expanding the county parks. The majority of the county forest land acquisitions are existing forests that we add on in our blocking boundaries that we've already identified. And again, we work with only willing sellers. We don't go out and knock on doors. We look at what's available through the real estate market. A lot of times they'll call me and say, hey, where I'm selling my land, I'm next to you. Do you, county would have a land purchase policy? And we say, sure, we'll investigate it and bring it through the committee system and all the way to the county board. And that's what we've done in the past, and the county board has final say at the end.
Thank you. Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say this is not just forest land, is it also field that you mentioned before? Was there fields involved and stuff, or?
The majority of the county forest that we purchase is forests or marshes or next to. So it is lands that are particularly productive in the forest land. And I'd like to add too is a lot of all the forest land that we've had in the last 10 years when we were available to purchase, we've used the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. That's a state program to purchase these lands. We leverage 50%. We get a grant. It's a grant. We don't have to pay back, and we use that and match it with our forestry segregated land purchase account. Minimal, if any, levy money is used to purchase these properties. So that Knowles Nelson Stewardship account, we've purchased almost 900 acres and used almost $1 million of that over the last 10 years.
Thank you.
So the way I'm reading the packet, I might have missed it earlier when I stepped out, but the idea is to keep that the same, but you're adjusting what that amount would be, Tom?
So as I believe someone from the CPZ, I can't remember his name, that just spoke, he was saying that we will acquire 320. The goal is to acquire 320, and we haven't met that. So it's going to be somewhere between there. Hopefully, what I'm seeing is less lands available next to county forests that actually we can afford. Most of the folks want double the amount of what is appraised value, and I don't even bring that to the county. If they don't accept appraised value, I don't come to the county board with it because I know what the answer is going to be.
That makes sense. So then the 320 stays the same then with the update, or am I missing? Okay.
It can stay the same as the update because it matches the court plan and it matches our county forest plan.
Oh.
Or you could change that number and we could shoot for a little bit smaller number. I mean, that's up to the
But
committee.
then it's not consistent with the other plans, right?
It is not.
Yeah.
And if, for example, if you change the strategic plan to say no acres, if there was a very important piece of property that came up, either park and forest land, and the forestry committee or the park commission thought that land was important, we would bring it through the committee system and the county board, regardless if it was in the strategic plan, and it would be up to the county board to decide. I would go by, if they would direct me to bring this through, I would bring it through the committee system.
Sure. I guess my comment would be that I would support keeping it the same. If it's consistent with those other plans that we've gotten public feedback on, in addition to that, it sounds like that 320, we come below that, but in a sense, we do look for those areas that would be good additions to whatever we currently have in our inventory. And on top of that, if it's competitive out there, the county isn't going to be able to necessarily compete with those competitive places, with those competitive properties either. So I would support keeping it the same. Supervisor Shafinsky?
I'd like to thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Tom, for the explanation. I think my use of the word targeted might have been a little bit misunderstood because I think what you're doing, as you described it, you are being very selective. Okay, there's property that's available perhaps next to an existing forest unit, and it also sounds as though you're being very restrained in the approach. So after some explanation and discussion, I think I can agree with this. Thank you.
Okay. I lost my page here. I apologize. Backing up to still in 5.2, but backing up, and maybe I don't necessarily recall this immediately, but in regards to eliminating strategy D with the land use capability index, are there any discussion, or is there any discussions in regards to that? Seeing and hearing none, that will be eliminated. There's plenty of other work to fulfill that space anyway.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Leading on from what you indicated earlier, and is quite true, if we have other plans in the county, maintaining consistency is very important. When it comes to the outcome measures themselves are not identified in the comprehensive plan. They were developed as part of the strategic plan as a support element to accomplish the objective and the goals and the strategies. So in the spirit of the consistency, if you will, anytime that there is a modification to a strategy or text or language in an objective, that should also be reflected in the comprehensive plan, because otherwise they won't remain consistent. So part of this process would be also to follow and stay in accordance with Wisconsin statutes, which is 66.1001, to ensure that not only the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan marry one another and they're consistent. So that's an important thing, and I agree with Lance. These are living documents. They can change at any time, but we have to go through the formal process as outlined by the state to make sure that we remain consistent in both plans. Thank you.
I think what Jeff is saying is, depending on what comes out of all these committees, we may need to look at updating the comp plan as well, is what he's getting at, so.
That is correct.
Okay. Anything else to add with the strategy D elimination for 5.2? Seeing, hearing none. Outcome measure 1, the phosphorus reduction point. We heard from staff as far as making that a more attainable amount to get to that 20% by 2022. Is there anything to add there? The only thing I'll say with that one is that it's good to know that we're at least having an impact, because for a long time we were always sort of wondering what the data was saying. So now that we actually have numbers back, that's a good sign. With that, 5.2, I think there's a consensus there. And I think what we'll do is we'll take a motion at the end to recommend these on to does it go to exec or does it go to county board, Lori? Was the exec? Okay. All right, 6.3 then. I think the only updates here with the outcome measures, outcome measure 1 with the groundwater protection plan. Are there any comments with this one? Marilyn?
Is that PFAS or whatever you're talking about, is that going to be included somewhere in this? Is that with the groundwater?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
You know, that PFAS, what the people are talking about, you know, that's in the groundwater and spreading and so forth, that's probably going to be under this grouping,
So
right?
I think the way we see it from CPZ is that the groundwater plan is where the finer details of what needs to go into that, what needs to be addressed and discussed would be looked at, that there would be a working group that would coalesce around developing that groundwater plan and would give some direction to what role the county would play as it relates to PFAS, things like that, so.
Thank you.
Anything else for outcome measure 1? Seeing and hearing none. Outcome measure 2 in regards to the pout system closures. Any comments, discussion? The interesting thing will be in regards to the policy discussions we'll have with the revolving loan fund, how that will impact that number, which will be very interesting to see over the next couple of years. And then outcome measure 3, which was what required the additional discussion as indicated by staff in their report. So 2 ideas were floated, which were the wellhead, and then what was the other one, Kirsty?
There we go. Wellhead protection areas, and then also surface water buffers and wetland restoration related to surface water. So I don't have like a neat and clean proposal to you all on how I would word such a thing. I just kind of wanted to throw the concept out there and see how you felt about it, and we could always wordsmith it.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions to begin, and then, of course, I'll follow up back with the committee if they have questions. But I guess in regards to the wellhead areas, in your professional approach, how much of that do you think really can be influenced by the county? Do you see a lot of those protection areas being within municipal areas where they have a lot of authority to regulate, or do you see opportunity for the county to do something there?
I see opportunity for the county to connect the pieces of the puzzle together. So I feel like, especially in a lot of rural communities, even people on, town boards or village boards or whatnot, where those wellhead protection areas are not common knowledge. And so the county can give that information to the municipalities, saying, just a reminder, this is where your wellhead protection areas are. We can also serve as a resource for whether or not the land use that is occurring within a wellhead protection area is something that they should be concerned about. So, we can create basically a database of, what land use is occurring within our wellhead protection areas, and then target the wellhead protection areas that we are concerned about. I saw some that have mining happening within those areas, or just farm fields that are looking very rough with no living cover on it, which we know is not good on soils that are very permeable and have nutrients move through them quickly. So, maybe there are 70% of our wellhead protection areas that are doing just fine, but if there are a couple of areas where the county could reach out to, village boards or city councils or something like that, just saying, hey, we're really trying to make a push to focus on groundwater protection in Marathon County. We're here to let you know that we reviewed your wellhead protection area and we do have some concerns. Would you like some help or ideas on how we could maybe take a little bit of a better approach to changing the land use in that area? And at the county, we have the resources to help change that land use as well. Like maybe it's a farm field where it's marginal cropland anyway, and we can let the producer know, hey, did you know there's this program available where you can get $300 an acre every year to have this in perennial grasses or a prairie instead of, really wet soils where you're trying to grow beans or corn, things like that.
So, and that leads me into my second question in regards to, and we'll even talk about, let's talk about perennial grasses, let's talk about buffer strips, then that kind of leads into that second point. And I guess my question is that whatever goal that's set there is going to have to be related to some sort of data, and that's probably going to be related to some sort of acreage that utilizes this method, right? So, and maybe this is something that we have to follow up with next month, but do we actually have data for acreage as something that we could put into a plan?
For the wellhead protection areas or for the buffers and wetland restoration?
The second point that you made in regards to the buffers.
Right. For certain watersheds like the Fenwood that we do have extensive data and that we've been doing a lot of work on, we absolutely have that data readily available. But since we are talking about county-wide for this goal, we would have to spend way more time and resources on developing a database of like every buffer and wetland in the county than you guys would ever want us to spend time on. So I think it would be feasible to make a goal like Marathon County will work with agencies and have staff do 25 new buffer projects or wetland restorations before December 31st, 2024. Something like setting a number to the basis of those conservation projects, I think is totally doable. But to have the data saying this is what we have now is probably not worth the time and resources it would take to do that countywide. That was done in the Fenwood. There is a database of the length of all the buffers and everything, but that was done by UW-Madison students for like $10,000 or something very expensive.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Do you have anything dealing with high-capacity wells and how many in one location where it might draw down, the aquifer, the water, anything like that? Because I know in some areas, to the county south of us has down into the central sands, they have more of a problem than what we do here in Marathon County. I was just wondering if high-capacity wells come in any place and how many of them?
We do also have a water desert in Marathon County as well that is mapped, and it is a resource concern in our county and impacts the development in western Marathon County. All the high-capacity wells in the county are already mapped. Those are mapped by the DNR, and those are available as public information in their database. It's certainly something that impacts the land use around them, and it affects the water quality. It affects, as you know, it affects a lot of different things. And so I think that, staff already take some of that into consideration. I know Jeff takes a lot of that into consideration with the planning that he does, and works a lot with planning around the water desert that we have in the western part of the county as well. But in terms of, ways that we can include protecting both ground and surface water, I think if we can come up with a goal that is focusing on something to kind of encapsulate both of them together, which I feel like the wellhead protection areas, if we can focus more on getting the safe land uses in place on top of them, that really kind of is very similar to what we're talking about doing for surface water too. With the buffers and with wetland restoration, it's really all about getting that perennial vegetation on the landscape.
Other comments, discussion? Supervisor Drabeck.
Just a quick question. Didn't we do buffers a couple of years ago where there was a certain buffer that was put on? I keep thinking, I have all these cobwebs in my brain. I'm trying to brush some of them off, but I think we did some of that already, didn't we?
Are you maybe thinking of the CREP program, like capital CREP as an acronym? Is that what comes to mind?
Yeah, I don't remember the name. Yeah,
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Another suggestion that was just brought forward was perhaps just if we cut the second part of the outcome measure and just stop it at animal waste to surface and groundwater will be reduced, and take out the part about ensuring, then that would give us some leverage to sort of decide what the priorities are. In terms of, so take out the specifics about the animal waste facilities, but then within our department, we could decide where the priorities would be to reduce the animal waste to surface and groundwater. I'm not sure if that would quite work or not, but Administrator Leonard just brought that forward as possibly an easy fix that would
Well,
give us
and to your
Yeah.
point, Lori, and to Lance's point, that would give us the flexibility to get this on to exec and also be able to spend some time and update these outcome measures. So
I would also maybe, I love that idea. Great idea. I would also maybe just add in 2 more words like discharges of animal waste and soil erosion to surface and groundwater. Because the soil erosion, so even if it's not like a runoff of manure off a field, if it's just soil eroding and it hits the groundwater, keep in mind that a lot of our fields that receive either commercial fertilizer or animal waste, at some point they have very high levels of phosphorus in that soil. So even if it's just soil leaving a field and hitting the water, you're still having phosphorus hit the water. So I would maybe add in and soil erosion.
contaminants, maybe.
But soil's not a
And Mr. Chair?
contaminant. Yeah.
oh, staff talks about that. Jeff, did you have something?
Soil is life.
Yeah, just to add to that, typically what you'll see too in these measurable outcomes is a baseline. So you could establish a baseline from which to determine if you're moving the needle in the right direction, if you're if you are accomplishing your
I'm
goal
with you.
or your objective, if you will. So that should help out as well. If it's a fuzzy moving target, so to speak.
Sure, as opposed to the, and again, I don't want to use the word arbitrary, but, we'll do 4 more, we'll do 1,000 more versus, the baseline providing some perspective there. But I think that, and maybe this is a question I have to go back to Lance too, but the whole idea behind this whole process, Lance, was to try and get to a finite point by September for exec, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have maybe a suggestion. We had a brief powwow. Discharges, so by December 31st, 2024, discharges of animal waste, contaminants, and soil to surface and groundwater will be reduced. Period. That way you, as your point, Mr. Chair, it provides, flexibility with respect to the approach. You know, in some areas we might utilize buffer strips, or as Kirsty referenced, if it's a wellhead issue, we might choose prairie or grasslands, or it provides staff the flexibility to address those negative events, the discharges, with appropriate remediation or prevention, I
The
should say.
thing is, though, is that then it becomes, as an outcome measure, sort of directionless, though, right? I mean, you're not going to have hard numbers. You're going to have to pull from various practices to support the accomplishment of that objective, though.
And I would defer to CPZ. I don't know if do we have just raw numbers on the number of discharges we have of those events? Because if it's just a
If
reduction,
we have
we
raw
can track.
numbers on the amount of discharges in the county, and if I ever calculate that, I will probably go into such a deep depression, you will never see me again. So no, we do not have those numbers. We have a lot of work to do. It's a big county.
So then my next, not to build off of that, because 5 minutes ago I was saying this is a great thing, but now I'm sort of questioning it, because now I'm thinking that, well, if we don't have numbers behind it, you know, we were just talking about SMART goals, right? So just but with a blanket statement saying reduction, that doesn't give us a lot of, like I said, direction. Supervisor Shafinsky, did you have something?
I do, actually, and I think we're dancing around the terminology here. We have outcome measure, in this case, outcome measure number 3, but I think we've determined that we have nothing to actually measure. And that comes back to SMART goals. It's not measurable as it sits right now.
So I do just want to add, though, so there are numbers, it's just like, you know, like phosphorus reduction, right? We have numbers behind that, but like the events themselves, that's what.
Number 3 is not measurable as it currently exists.
Well, I think
Right.
as,
And we, if we're going to have an outcome, it should be measurable in some way, shape, or form.
so as it's presented on the screen here, which is the prior objective, it is though, because it talks about the idle.
Because, yeah, we did
So there it
establish a
is. But with this
baseline.
proposed one that we're just talking about right now, that's the one that gives me concern. I think that's the one you have concern with. Correct. Okay. I said all that without the mic on. Sorry about that. So I think that's a tougher one, because you have to look at what we have for data and such. But now, Kirsty, something you were talking about earlier was, and this is sort of in the vein of like providing education for zoning, though, is that you were talking about like engaging with local governments to provide them resources to help out with the wellhead protection. So is that something that, I guess to go back to the committee here, is it worth forwarding on the really broad text to the executive committee in the hopes that we return to this within the next couple months and actually put something hard in the plan? I think that's really what it comes down to. Because if we don't, then we send this on to exec as is, and we're basically going to be doing it by saying, hey, by the way, we're going to change number 3 probably within the next 2 months, but here's the plan.
I have just a quick comment on
Sure,
that.
go ahead, Christine.
So if we're talking about like really focusing on finding things that are doable, achievable, would help achieve, this overall objective here, I really feel like with these wellhead protection areas, within the next 2 years, if I come back to you 2 years from now and I say we created a database of all of the wellhead protection areas, we categorized all the land use in each of those areas, we reached out to every single municipality that has them, connected with them because the Marathon County Board said it was their objective to protect wellhead protection areas. I feel like without a doubt, I could come give you a report in 2 years saying we connected all of those dots and any wellhead protection areas that had land use that we were environmentally concerned about, we worked to fix and improve those.
So how about this? As opposed to, and it's not that I necessarily was, not necessarily I didn't agree with providing that flexibility because I see or saw value in it, but maybe we just put something in there like develop a plan to address wellhead protection areas, send that on to exec, and then put something harder in the plan within the next 3 to 4 months.
We could do that.
What does the committee think about that? Tony?
I could certainly support that.
With the idea that we revisit it.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, we get something that was started, and it's getting us on a path towards something that's measurable.
Okay. And I'm in agreement there as well. Rest of the committee? So that would have to be updated and whatever's sent on to exec. So I guess part of the motion, part of the direction we give to staff to sort of end the discussion here would be to develop that language and pass it on to exec. Now, keep in mind, if you do not agree with the language or have concerns about it, you would, of course, have the opportunity to address it at the county board meeting, or, of course, you can come to exec too and speak to the committee there as well. So are we comfortable with providing that direction to staff to put that language together? Yes? Okay. All right, so I think we're ready for a motion. And I guess based on the consensus from the committee here, I would just ask that you reflect in your motion that, you know, you would forward objectives 5.2 and 6.3 for the strategic plan update onto the executive committee for discussion, and also direct staff to develop the wellhead protection objective outcome measure for objective 6.3. Would anybody willing to make that motion? Lance, do you have anything, or are you okay? All right. Okay. Motion from the committee? Well, Lance, I'm the chair. I can still make a motion, right? Sure. That's really reassuring. Come on, somebody else do it, please. Go ahead, Supervisor Shavinsky.
Okay. I'll take a stab at this. I'd like to make a motion that we move the objectives as outlined in 5.2 as written by and submitted by staff, and for 6.3 as written by staff, with the addition that we change outcome measure 3 to reflect a wellhead protection program, the details of which to be added at a later date.
Sure. That's fine. Okay. Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on to item number 8, next meeting, October 4th, 2022, 3 p.m., Assembly Room and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussions. 8B, announcements, requests, correspondence. I do have an announcement / correspondence item to bring up. On August 22nd, August 22nd, I received email from Chairman Gibbs for the new supervisors in regards to the rules processes and how they work. A resolution, an item can be provided to our county board chairman, and from there he has 60 days to refer it to the committee of jurisdiction. Supervisor Gibbs received a resolution from Supervisor Mask regarding the moratorium on mining in the state of Wisconsin. Being that I received it on August 22nd and I knew that we had to have the strategic plan discussion today, I decided not to place it on this agenda. I will place it on the agenda for the October 4th meeting. So you will receive a copy of that resolution. I suppose I can hand it off to staff and then staff can forward it on to the committee ahead of time, but I wanted to make you all aware of that. Any other announcements, requests, correspondence? All right, seeing and hearing none, item number 9 would be in order.
I think,
Oh, Sorry.
Administrator Leonard had an
Yeah,
announcement.
if I may, you may receive a request for a special meeting later this week. On Thursday, I'm working with Chair Gibbs, and I have to pull you aside, Chair Longenhan, to get that scheduled. If the stars align, we have an issue that we may need to bring to this committee. But we could do it. It's a one-issue meeting, so just please watch your email, and if we do reach out to you, try to get back to us as promptly as possible so we can make sure we have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Administrator. Anything else? Doing my final look around the room. Okay. Item number 9 would be in order. Oh, look at these two. Motion by Supervisor Drabeck. Is there a second? Sir, Rodney Roskoff with the second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you all. Thank you, staff.
I wasn't sure if you guys are sure about that motion.
Before everybody heads out, if we could have you sign the decision.
Oh, is that gonna